Justice changes shape depending on where you stand, and that's what makes Kuzan such an interesting character, as he's written in a way where we always question where he truly stands. Kuzan is One Piece's most compelling character, and by the end of this video, I can guarantee that you'll agree. We'll start out by analyzing this character in depth and going into many theories to get some answers on this mysterious Iceman. What are his intentions, goals, and motivations? What is Kuzan's role in the overarching story of One Piece? Is he truly a pirate or a marine undercover? Kuzan has a fascinating story here as someone who went from a marine admiral to a member of the evil Blackbeard pirates. Today we'll be answering all of this and so much more, because I've spent the last 2 weeks researching and rereading every chapter involving Kuzan and scouring the internet for any glimpse of clues to help us better understand the character. And through this process, I came across many shocking revelations leading me to believe that no one really truly understands Kuzan. For example, I think I finally solved what Kuzan's dream is, leading us to better understand his character as a whole. I also believe that Kuzan has the will of D, and I believe that Kuzan manipulated the entire Enies lobby buster call event, essentially making this guy responsible for the destruction of one of the most important military bases while he was still a marine admiral. And finally, we'll be looking at Kuzan's dynamics to Garp and more importantly Blackbeard, with Garp and Blackbeard saving Kuzan just like Luffy has saved many of his own crewmates from their lowest moments ever. This video will change your entire perspective on Kuzan, and I am so excited. But first, before we jump in, make sure you leave a like to support us. It really helps us get this video out to as many people as possible. So where does Kuzan's heart lie within the massive world of One Piece? Is Kuzan a pirate or a marine? Well, what if I told you that the answer to this question is that Kuzan is the only character in One Piece who is truly both? Now I know that sounds like a cop-out answer, but by the end of the video, you'll understand what I mean. And there's actually a really interesting and compelling reason to why I believe this. Kuzan began his career as a marine, idolizing the greatest marine to ever live, Prime Garp. It's like Kobe coming into the league idolizing Michael Jordan, which is ironic because we all know who the true pink mamba is. Oh yeah, the guy whose name is literally Kobe. But you have to imagine what Garp's impact must have been on the Marines at that time. This was someone who was up there with Goldie Roger on the opposite spectrum, but someone who carries the same respect and influence on the entire world. Garp is One Piece's version of a true superhero, a Superman, All Might, or Mr. Incredible like figure. So it only makes sense that coming up as a young Marine, Kuzan would look up to Garp, as this one figure would drive his passion into another level. We even see in Volume 0 a younger Kuzan fawning over Prime Garp, who just turned down the Admiral position, saying, "You're so cool, Garp-san." It's important to acknowledge the impact that Garp had on Kuzan because it's where his entire journey starts. In chapter 1081, we find out that Kuzan sees Kobe as his replacement, the new golden child of the Marines, replacing him as Garp's protege who would carry on his will through the Marines. And Kuzan even explains how Garp's influence on him is the entire reason for his actions leaving the Marines and joining the Blackbeard pirates. But to understand this, we need to first understand Garp's sense of justice, because Kuzan is referencing what I believe is Garp's free justice. I eventually want to make an entire video on Garp's character, but for now we'll only focus on his importance and influence on Kuzan's character. In a weird way, despite being the greatest Marine ever, Garp is essentially the closest thing a Marine could ever become to a pirate. And so it makes sense that his apprentice would actually become a pirate, taking this lesson of freedom a step further. Garp truly values the Marines as an organization, but he values freedom overall, his own free will, the free will of others. And this is where he runs into issues, as he's someone who's known for acting on his own. Like in this situation, for example, going to Hachinosu to save Kobe. He speaks his mind out loud for everyone to hear, as we see him trashing the celestial dragons in front of Stelly. And Garp just simply does not obey orders when he doesn't want to. For example, as we saw in Water 7, when he doesn't capture Luffy and tells Sengoku straight up to his face that he chose not to because it's his grandson. Garp is someone who simply does as he pleases, an uncontrollable Giga Chad force of justice. He also hates celestial dragons, who takes away people's freedom as they have many slaves to do their bidding and force women that they find beautiful into slavery. At the end of the day, this freedom over all nature had a huge impact on Kuzan's upbringing, as he learned from the GOAT. Combining this with the fact that this very nature led to the most respected Marine in the entire organization's history and resulted in a powerful legend capable of battling the most powerful pirate in existence like Zebek, Roger, and Whitebeard. And it's understandable to see what Kuzan means when he says, "I love that about you," which is why I live the way I do now, referencing Garp's free nature to live in the moment and do what he feels right, regardless of the consequences or societal pressure. But another interesting thing about Garp's lesson that Kuzan did not follow, unlike this free will, is that Garp says that he taught Kuzan Kuzan that wavering is a sign of weakness. And this hits hard, literally as Garp palms Kuzan's face like he's Vince Carter and dumps his face into the ground with a blue hole. But also on a more personal level, as Kuzan is clearly someone who's extremely conflicted and always been a wavering character, which we're about to dive into next. Once a Marine prodigy, and now the 10 Titanic captain of Blackbeard's pirates, there's a very gray area within Kuzan's morality at this moment, as I believe Garp saying this to him senses that even Kuzan is unsure of his own actions joining the crew that's so evil and twisted. In the One Piece world, there's a societal pressure and outlook of the never-ending war between a Marine and a pirate. They're both kind of similar. They both have good and bad people within the two categories. They both sail the seas and fight each other, and they're both conquering different islands and setting up bases. But to be a pirate is a direct sign of war against the world as a whole. It's a symbol of rebellion, hoisting a Jolly Roger to say I don't want or need any part of the world government's strength. So once again, seeing a former admiral in Aokiji becoming a captain for a Yonko crew is quite the dichotomy when we look at how opposing these two ranks are. And another thing about Kuzan deciding to join Blackbeard Pirates is that it would be one thing to join the Straw Hats, but going on the completely opposite spectrum, the Blackbeard Pirates are irredeemable villains. You might think, why would Kuzan want to join the smelliest pirate crew in the seas? But I think I can convince you that Blackbeard is actually the perfect choice and makes perfect sense for Kuzan's character, which we'll get into by the very end. But first, I want to look at the incident that changed Kuzan's entire perspective and worldview, the moment that began this wavering, conflicting ideology within him, and that is, of course, the Ohara Incident. But before we jump into the importance of the Ohara Incident, subscribe if you're not already. If you enjoy One Piece theories, analysis, and power scaling, this is the channel for you. I'm currently working on a massive Wano review video going through the entire arc, so if that interests you, hit that bell like Luffy and Scott Pia so you don't miss out when we finally upload the video. The Ohara Incident was the moment where Kuzan began to question his entire ideology and life as a Marine. His big questions being planted here, which would eventually sprout and spiral into his betrayal of the Marines. While it's technically a law, yet a corrupt one and unfair one to not research certain topics like ancient poneglyphs, the Oharans did indeed commit this crime, and to Kuzan at the time, he understood this. While a Buster call still seemed a bit over the top, there was still at least a reason for taking out the scholars and branding them as criminals who went directly against the law. But where everything went too far is when his former Marine ally and the other Buster call vice admirals began killing innocent lives who had nothing to do with the crimes of the Oharans. Instead of seeking justice through evidence and punishing crimes, Sakazuki begins targeting harmless innocent women and children. He slaughters innocent lives, essentially committing a certain G word that YouTube demonetizes.
Wait a minute!
He was watching in real time the horrifying extinction of the Oharans. Kuzan, while looking at the destruction and chaos surrounding him, this extreme action of Sakazuki, all he could really think of was, this is way too much, it's going too far. This is not justice. The Ohara Incident is where Kuzan began to completely lose his mind. It's that moment where he began to question what is right and what is wrong, and whether he was fighting alongside good or evil. The Ohara Incident was the moment where the Marines failed their prodigy, as he could never see the organization the same way after. I mean, just look at the shock and disgust on Kuzan's face. Oda does a great job of showing the emotion of shock through facial expression, and that's exactly what's drawn here. His entire reality and perception of justice just completely shifted. It completely flipped dramatically to the point where he allowed Nico Robin to escape, attempting to make up for the disgusting actions of Sakazuki, and this view of absolute and thorough justice. The irony of all of it is that Kuzan's justice was once a fired up and burning justice, as his spirit burned with passion for the Marines. But the psychological and moral questioning within Kuzan that's constantly evolving over time is what makes him so interesting. Someone who started as a typical Garp stan, but slowly forming into someone who holds a nasty view of the Marines in his heart. Kuzan goes against his orders of capturing and defeating the fugitive and traitor Jaguar de Sao, and then again with Nico Robin, allowing them to survive simply because Sao was his friend, and he bluffs and puts up a great facade. I think one reason why so many people believe Kuzan is not actually a Blackbeard pirate is because he's so great at acting. He seems to flip-flop so much, and Oda wrote a character where it's so hard to know where he really lies. And I think it's so impressive how Oda puzzled the entire One Piece fan base into never really knowing what's going on with Kuzan's character. One more thing I do want to quickly mention regarding the Ohara Incident is that about a year before it was confirmed, I released an entire video predicting why Kuzan saved Sao, and why Sao was still alive after the Ohara Incident. This was essentially confirmed during the Egghead arc. The reasoning I had was that Oda never confirmed him to be dead or alive, and since we saw his friend use the ice time capsule attack, my theory was that he preserved preserved his body cryogenically. I mean, if Kuzan was going to help Nico Robin survive, it only makes sense that he would do the same for his own friend. And I've seen some people be even upset about this, as it's essentially another fake out death, which Oda has become infamous for. But I think in the case of this fake out, it still enhanced Nico Robin's backstory, making it a much more tragic and traumatic situation as she watches Sal get frozen alive when he shows up in front of her during the Long Ring arc. As she remembers how terrifying of a man he can be, Robin's belief of Sal's death still impacted her character development to become the person she is, and it still makes her smiling with the Straw Hat Pirate so rewarding, as Robin being happy just hits different due to her relationship with Sal. Sal being alive 30 years later didn't take away all the pain and tragedy that Robin had to go through for all those years, making her into the cold-hearted and morbid woman we know and love today. But the main reason why I love Sal surviving, aside from it making sense with the clues Oda left us, is how much more interesting and compelling it is for Kuzan's character. Because this moment turning against the world government's orders for the first time does arguably more for Kuzan's character than even Nico Robin, as this was the first moment that we can clearly see Kuzan begin to defy and turn against the so-called justice. A small step which would eventually become something much bigger. Right before this, Kuzan says, "Justice changes shape depending on where one stands," basically saying that everyone has their own view on morality and what justice is, depending on their own values and their own personal experience. And Kuzan continues by saying, "That is why I won't judge your justice, but if you're going to interfere with our work, I cannot ignore that." I really like this mentality once again, saying that he won't judge Sal's views on what's right and wrong. He won't judge your justice, but if you stand in our way, it's hands. A simple man who doesn't want problems, but isn't afraid to get physical if you do want problems. We also saw he allowed Nico Robin and Luffy to live, but once Luffy came at him interrupting the Marine's justice, he was ready to fight. There's also a lot of irony in Kuzan being burning justice at the time of the Ohara Incident, as Sakazuki is the one burning Ohara down to a crisp. And it's also ironic since Kuzan is the Ice Man. But this will also be the last day that Kuzan will follow this burning or fired up justice, as he would do a complete 180, as he would now represent lazy justice. Now when I look at Kuzan's lazy justice, it does seem that Kuzan is using this as an excuse to live how he wants while still working for the Marines. It gives him a bit more freedom, and we could also view this as a representation of Kuzan simply becoming lazier over time, as he continued to keep losing faith in the Marines. The more he questioned the Marines' justice, the lazier or more disobedient he would become. It's obviously not completely true laziness at its core of his personality or nature, as we saw from one time he was burning justice, which is the complete opposite, showing us a time when Kuzan was fully bought into the Marines, and he had this burning spirit, showing no signs of laziness, especially when it came to justice. Another line that I really liked from the Ohara Incident was when Kuzan tells Robin, "Sometimes the idea of justice can turn people mad," as it seems he's referring to a few different things here. First, Kuzan is obviously referring to himself, as he continues his statement by explaining how and why he'll help Robin to escape from the island. It's once again reinforcing that this incident truly drove this dude to lose his mind, and seeking justice pushed him to question his entire ideology and do something that seems crazy to the other Marines at the Buster Call, since he's helping Robin and they're blowing up her island. But then the other two people who are obviously gone mad through seeking justice is everyone that's helping in the Ohara Incident, everyone partaking in this event, but specifically owning in on Sakazuki, as he's clearly the most unhinged lunatic craving justice, salivating for the pure extreme form of absolute and thorough justice, driving him to not only eradicate only evil criminals, but even potential criminals. And this idea that we should destroy evil at its very root, no matter if you have to attack innocent lives or your own friends and allies, as long as it's all in the name of justice, as long as we never give evil a chance to rise, and those who are innocent are worth losing in the crossfire. This is obviously a very insane take on justice, but paralleling Kuzan to Sakazuki, this quote of justice turning people mad is poetic in the end, as it's justice that ultimately drives both these characters to crazy actions. Another little detail I want to point out that's actually hilarious is how stupid these Marines are. I mean, Kuzan just walks over, creates an ice path for Nico Robin to follow as she escapes, and then you have even one of the Marines say, "Hey, it's almost like our rudder is frozen. We couldn't move the ship when we try to go after the girl escaping from the frozen ice path," while you literally have an Iceman sitting right next to you. This guy can freeze an entire lake and just froze a vice admiral. Like, bruh, you know, I always found this comically stupid behavior from the random fodder Marines just so damn funny. And then Sengoku's just dead silent in his office sitting there listening to this, just staring at Kuzan like, "It was obviously you, buddy. You helped her escape, but you know what, I'll let it slide." Because at the end of the day, it is an innocent little girl. I mean, of course, me, the Golden Buddha, has a soft spot for children, and Kuzan and Sengoku are basically just side-eyeing each other, staying silent as possible, like, don't say a word. But yeah, these Marines Marines, they're just straight dummies. We know that Kuzan owed Garp a great favor or debt, which he brought up multiple times during a post-time skip. The first time he mentions this is in chapter 319, where he tells Luffy, "You're just like your gramps, you're wild and have no self-control. I owed a great favor to your grandfather from a long time ago. I came to see you and Nico Robin." And then again in chapter 566 during Marineford, where he brings it up to Luffy once again, saying, "I owed your grandfather a great debt, but you leave me no choice. You chose this path." And now stay with me because you'll understand why I'm connecting Ohara to this favor soon enough. But what could this favor or lifelong debt be? Well, I have two answers actually. The first obvious fact is that Kuzan simply respects Garp and has personal connection to him, which is why he doesn't want to harm Luffy, as Garp is someone close to him, and therefore so is Luffy. But after chapter 1087, it seems this debt that he owes Garp would simply be the death of Garp taking in Kuzan and training him. Because after all, we see Garp very begrudgingly take him under his wing and train him even though he never even wanted to. We even see Garp barking at him like the dog that he is, telling him to F off and stop trying to steal his precious freedom. But over time, we see Garp finally respect Kuzan and train side by side with a young Marine who looked up to him. And training with Garp was obviously a key factor in Kuzan becoming the person that he is now, being able to go head to head against someone as ruthless and powerful as Sakazuki in a 10-day battle for Fleet Admiral, and also molding his character traits as well. This favor that he owes Garp could simply be him wanting to repay Garp in some way for taking him under his wing when Garp didn't want to. And I also love the character development for Garp's character through Kuzan, as we see he becomes older and wiser as he values the youth and potential of Kobe and the future Marines, training them and telling them to sacrifice an old man for the young child. But it's very likely that Kuzan was the one who gave Garp the different perspective on the youth in the first place, as Garp saw Kuzan bloom, becoming an admiral and skyrocketing through the rank after his direct influence. But despite this maybe being the obvious answer, I actually think the death and favor is a lot deeper than just this. Because so far in the One Piece story, we've only seen Kuzan bring up this death during the pre-time skip, and you would think that while fighting Garp, this would be brought up specifically at least once by Kuzan, and not just in this little vague training flashback way. And so I think it goes deeper into Kuzan's wavering nature, as the reason this favor was never brought up in the post-time skip is because it has a bigger significance to Kuzan as a Marine, and doesn't really hold the same weight anymore as a pirate. Alright, so let's jump balls deep into this favor and why it may have been so important to Kuzan while he was still a Marine, and why it ties back to the Ohara Incident, because that day marked the moment that Kuzan began to question everything. He is questioning, why am I a Marine? Is the justice I'm fighting for really righteous? And so Kuzan's faith in the Marines had dwindled. But this is where Garp comes in. I explained earlier the many reasons that Kuzan looked up to Garp, and I believe that somehow Garp single-handedly restored Kuzan's faith in the Marines. I believe Garp, through being this Giga Chad All Might-like character, saved him. I mean, after all, he is the hero, and what kind of hero would he be if he couldn't save Kuzan, his own protege? So that is the favor and debt that Kuzan speaks of. The ultimate favor being that without Garp being this role model and ultimate example of what a Marine is, Kuzan may have left the Marines a long time ago. Thinking back to when we see Kuzan meet Luffy, of course he allows him to survive. Not only has Luffy joined up with Robin, but he's also the grandson of the man who saved him from his lowest moments of self-doubt. Like Vegapunk said to Dragon, not everyone in the Marines is bad. There's some good people, and I'm sure he was referencing Garp here, as we know Garp is his father. In this corrupted and horrible organization who's committed atrocities and despicable acts, it's people like Garp who hold up a precedent of greatness, a standard of hope and true justice within the organization. And so I do believe that Garp saved Kuzan from fully losing faith in the Marines. Garp obviously couldn't save him in the end, and it was only temporary, but for that time when Kuzan remained a Marine, it was the most valuable thing. And this is why Kuzan doesn't bring it up when they face in the post-time skip, because now Kuzan is like Darth Vader, someone who Garp seemingly saved, and ultimately Kuzan would join the darkness of the Blackbeard pirates in his lowest moments. It would be almost disrespectful to Garp to bring this up now, as it would be like spitting in the face of Garp as the hero. And so it's even more interesting when you consider that Luffy is just like a spitting image of Garp, who's a pirate version of him. And so maybe Luffy also impacted Kuzan to say maybe not all pirates are really that evil. Alright, so what I'm going to explain now is a deep theory regarding Kuzan, which will absolutely blow your mind. Because once I put these pieces together, I was shocked at how crazy this theory actually is. You see, I believe that Kuzan pulled the strings to manipulate the destruction of Enies lobby. Now I know some of you might think that Luffy is a terrorist thanks to Hassan.
Luffy is a terrorist.
But I think we might have to take a look at Kuzan's actions because this dude has some explaining to do. And the main point of this entire theory that I want you to keep in the back of your mind is that it coexists with this entire analysis, because I believe that Kuzan was already planning on becoming a pirate, already betraying the Marines even years before the post time skip. I think it was something that was lingering in his head for a while, and I think this theory proves that. So we find out from Spandam that Kuzan was the one who gave him the golden snail, which when used gives the power to enact a buster call. Right off the bat, that's really suspicious, because why on earth would you trust this guy with the power to initiate a buster call? But what if I told you that Kuzan manipulated Spandam into his plan of blowing up Enies Lobby, one of the top 3 most important military bases? You see, Kuzan knew about Spandam's power tripping tendencies, his unhinged nature. So playing 4D chess, Kuzan was essentially able to trick Spandam into doing his dirty work while keeping his own hands 100% clean. I don't know if this classifies as terrorism, but it's definitely Kuzan betraying his own government and causing mayhem and destruction on the Judicial Island. And now let me lay out the evidence because it goes deep. If we go back to the end of Long Ring, Kuzan acknowledges Luffy and the Straw Hat crew nearing Water 7. In chapter 321, Kuzan says, "Oh my, they'll be close to headquarters," referencing the Straw Hats going to Water 7. So what if Kuzan went to Enies Lobby after Long Ring and gave Spandam the golden snail, predicting a possibility that Luffy would charge into Enies Lobby to save Nico Robin? Spandam may have told him about his plan to bring her back to Enies Lobby and have her finally captured. And what's absolutely mind-blowing about all of this is that we would eventually see in chapter 382 Spandam say that the wind began blowing my way. Right when I was running out of patience and about to take drastic measures of my own, that was when I got good news from Admiral Aokiji. Nico Robin was on a pirate ship heading to Water 7. To calm myself down, I had a coffee and then planned out the entire thing, including approval for a buster call. We would then find out that only an admiral or higher could approve the golden snail and have authority over the buster call. So essentially it was Kuzan who allowed Spandam to have this power. Now you might say maybe Kuzan just wanted to give Spandam the buster call so that Luffy and Robin could be defeated without bearing their responsibilities since he's lazy and they're still dangerous criminals. But we know for a fact that isn't really true. We already know Kuzan's true feelings on Robin, Luffy, and the Straw Hats, because right before Water 7 and towards the very end, we see Kuzan allow Robin and Luffy to escape both times. The first time was at Long Ring, and then again at the very end of Water 7, we see Kuzan talking to Robin and letting them escape. Kuzan says, "I never expected the Straw Hats would defeat CP9. I had intended Enies Lobby to be the end of Ohara." And somehow this all gets even more crazy, because one thing that you may not remember is that Kuzan was there at Enies Lobby the entire time, and he never helped the Marines even once. As the Straw Hats escape the buster call and defeat CP9 in chapter 439, they're escaping the remaining Marines at Enies Lobby. In chapter 439, we see Kuzan on his ice bike, and one Marine says, "Aokiji, I didn't know you were here." And Kuzan's silent as he has no excuse for the fact that he just witnessed an entire buster call, an entire failed operation, and he didn't even help them at all. He could have taken the entire Straw Hat crew on his own and he didn't even move a finger. And Kuzan doesn't even look upset. He's not disappointed in the Marines taking a huge out. He isn't upset at the Judicial Island being up in flames. No, instead Kuzan with an emotionless stare says, "Looking at this fleet and the island, it's obvious for us. The incident was a complete and utter defeat." Instead of going after the Straw Hats, Kuzan allows Robin to escape once again, honoring Sao and Ohara. So was Kuzan just straight capping when he said that he was ready for Robin to die there at Ohara? Or was he there just in case that he needed to save her once again? I mean, who knows, but I really do think that it was Kuzan who took advantage of Spandam, who even described himself as someone extremely desperate, someone at the breaking point who was ready to take a drastic action and make insane calls like buster calling his own military base. And taking advantage of someone this down bad and crazy, Kuzan through the shadows manipulated the world government into destroying Enies Lobby and didn't even help the Marines once throughout the entire event. He just sat there, watched, and enjoyed the entire show. And when you put this entire idea into context, it changes your entire perspective of the Water 7 arc. This makes the ending of Enies Lobby even more poetic and compelling, because the entire story of Robin and Kuzan began with the moment the Admiral began to question the world government organization as a whole, as they witnessed the previous buster call with Ohara burning into flames. Now all of this is also insane when you consider the context of Kuzan being someone who would end up betraying the Marines and becoming a pirate of the Blackbeard pirates. But what I love about this theory is that if it's true, it shows that Kuzan's fall into piracy and betrayal of the Marines started way before. It shows that his heart was always swaying and wavering. And going back to the mystery of the favor being how Garp was the last remaining faith that he had in the Marines, it's also just a perfect ending to the entire Water 7 saga, with Kuzan catching a ride with Garp, who represents the good and faith he has in the Marines after he just schemed up a disastrous loss for the entire organization. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you why I believe Kuzan has the will of D, and it will lead us into his relationship with Blackbeard, which is extremely important to his character. But first, if you want to support us directly, the best way is by liking the video. But if you want to go above and beyond, you can leave a super thanks donation in the comments. It all goes back into the channel to give you the best possible videos. We use all the money made through super thanks to pay for editors, thumbnails, and we're very grateful as donations like these allow us to do YouTube full time and to make big videos like this on a more consistent basis. So, is it possible that Kuzan has the will of D? Could Kuzan be someone who follows the checker fate, as the Godosei speculate that Sabo is a D member as well? Well, I've been promoting the theory that Kuzan has the will of D for years now, and it's a very similar reason to why the Godosei believe that for Sabo. Because we see that Kuzan is tied by fate to Marshall D. Teach, Monkey D. Garp, and Jaguar D. Sal. So we can apply the exact same logic that the Godosei used for Sabo on Kuzan. It would make sense for Kuzan to be a D member as someone who never fully bought into the ways of the corrupt world government, someone who has these personal connections and bonds to the will of D members. And with Kuzan's full name never being revealed, it makes you wonder if Kuzan is Marshall D. Kuzan, a long lost cousin of Blackbeard, or maybe another family name completely. It's also possible if Kuzan is simply someone who follows the checkered fate that he could become a D member through Blackbeard or Garp, as it seems that Lily became one and maybe even Sabo. We've dropped a video on this channel previously where Wizard of Voice goes into why he believes that Kuzan is related to Marshall D. Teach, so I'll leave a link to that video in the description. It goes into the connection of how they both have an interest in the poneglyphs and Ohara, with Blackbeard being someone who Oda describes as a history buff, someone intrigued in the ancient world, as Oda even once stated that if Blackbeard existed in our world, he'd be an archaeologist. And of course, when you think of archaeology in One Piece, you think of Ohara. So let's go back to chapter 699 now. This is the chapter where Kuzan shows up at Punk Hazard and saves his friend Smoker from Doflamingo. In this chapter, Dofi asks Kuzan, where do you stand? Just what are you now? He's no simple wanderer. Only a man who's made up his mind about something can make a face like that. Okay, so I know Dofi isn't the most trustworthy source since he's completely insane, but I like to think that Oda is using Dofi's many connections and a very smart evil mind to hint that Kuzan has truly set his mind on the Blackbeard pirates. If we assume that Dofi is correct, this means that Kuzan has finally made up his mind and believes that he can achieve his goals and dreams by working with the Blackbeard pirates. In other words, Blackbeard convinced Kuzan to join his crew by explaining how similarly to Luffy's crewmates all having their own goals, by joining together they'll help each other achieve their dreams. For example, like with Nico Robin, by joining Luffy she can now reach Laugh-Tale and discover the One Piece, the poneglyphs, and the Void Century. And same with Nami's dream of circumnavigating the entire world and mapping it. So Blackbeard is saying chasing our dream, that is what it means to be a pirate. And if you join us, we'll help each other achieve what we all see. So when Dofi says only a man who's made up his mind can make a face like that, I think Kuzan genuinely is a Blackbeard pirate because I know he's drunk, but speaking to Blackbeard, this is the first time we ever seen Kuzan really genuinely laugh, revealing his goofy laugh to be a da ha ha. I know it's hard to imagine, but similarly to Luffy, Blackbeard does have this charisma, this certain charm about him, cheering up Kuzan after he's mourning his loss in a sad state. When you think of true pirates in One Piece, Luffy, Blackbeard, and Roger come to mind. Blackbeard defines what it means to be a pirate, and so it's hard to ignore Blackbeard's ambition and boldness inviting a former admiral to his crew. Similar to how Luffy says we don't care about the past to Kuzan when defending Robin as this backstabbing criminal at long range. And now jumping back to Punk Hazard real quick, Kuzan tells Smoker, I never thought the world government was the end all be all. Oda also establishes that Kuzan and Smoker are close friends and that they trust each other, as he brings up how Smoker told him about Luffy and the Straw Hats being the ones who actually saved Alabasta and not the Marines. So we have to assume that Kuzan isn't lying here and being 100% genuine with his old Marine friend. Kuzan goes on and says, you don't have to be affiliated to the Marines to accomplish things in the world, and there are some things that you can only see when you remain independent. I think this goes into Kuzan's curiosity that he's always had for researching poneglyphs, ever since Ohara. What about this mysterious indestructible rock with a mysterious language and message strikes so much fear into the world government that they have to burn down Ohara and demonize poneglyph research? Kuzan is telling Smoker he chose this path specifically because he has goals, aspirations, and dreams of his own, just like Blackbeard said to him when convincing him to join his crew. As a pirate teaming up with Blackbeard, together they can search the entire world for poneglyphs and other historical mysteries. And I do think it's one reason for him wanting to join the Blackbeard pirates, but I also think he has one main goal, one much bigger and more specific to his character. Kuzan believes that justice changes depending on where you stand, and so I believe Kuzan's dream was to become Fleet Admiral and change the Marines as a whole, which represent justice. Okay, so I know this sounds crazy crazy since many people think that Kuzan didn't even want to be Fleet Admiral in the first place. But I don't think it's that straightforward. The main argument people have for this is because Kuzan is lazy, so he wouldn't want to deal with all the politics and paperwork like Naruto dealing with the tedious tasks when he becomes Hokage. And as I've explained earlier, Kuzan isn't necessarily pure laziness. He instead uses laziness as an excuse to do as he pleases and avoids doing orders that he disagrees with. Kuzan was so mentally broken by his defeat from Sakazuki, drinking away the pain. And mind you, this was 1 full year after his loss to Sakazuki at Punk Hazard, showing us that Kuzan's been in a full state of mourning for a full year. And sure, yeah, he's upset because he lost a leg. He's upset because he lost to his rival in the Marines. He's upset that Akainu is the one that gets to lead the Marines despite being a complete extremist. But most of all, I believe Kuzan is still heartbroken because he lost his chance to seize his own dream after working all these years as Garp's golden child. Garp was someone who never wanted to even be an admiral, and Kuzan, while admiring this, was someone with great goals and ambitions to move up the ranks as he was already an admiral. The thing I find really interesting is that when Jinbei was telling Luffy the story about Kuzan and Sakazuki's 10-day battle at Punk Hazard, he says, "As you know, Kuzan tends to be a lazy man, but in this instance he was furious and opposed the idea of Akainu becoming Fleet Admiral." And basically Sengoku, and I'm assuming also Garp, are nominating and pushing for Kuzan to become Fleet Admiral. But there was another side within the government who wanted Sakazuki, and we know they were both passionate about this fight because they both fundamentally believed that they can make a serious change to the Marines and the type of justice by gaining the highest authority within the Marines. Jinbei continues on to say, under Sakazuki, the Marines have become more powerful and determined than ever before. So there is this element of change and influence that the Fleet Admiral has on the Marines, as Akainu's Marines are way more aggressive than Sengoku. It was Akainu who decided to go into charge into the New World and set up their base in the New World. And there is some pushback that Kuzan and Sakazuki may have not have foreseen. For example, like the Godosei being the ultimate head of the world government and having even more control and say than Akainu and Kuzan expected. We see this when Akainu begins an argument with the Godosei over power, and they just straight up bully Akainu, saying, "We're the big bosses, we pull the strings from the shadows, we control what the world government does. We control everything at the end of the day." But in a more idealistic view, I do think that Kuzan and Akainu did believe at some point that they could change the entire Marines. And I also love how Jinbei is telling Luffy this story of the two admirals, and he concludes Sakazuki's story by becoming Fleet Admiral, but then slides in the Blackbeard pirates right after, foreshadowing all the way back then that Kuzan was now a member of the Blackbeard pirates, as this was how Kuzan's story ended. I mean, Jinbei even says, who knows where Kuzan is now and how he feels, before giving us the answer in the very next page.
Ah, I see.
Now, the reason I needed to explain all of this about Kuzan and Sakazuki's dreams and why they were both always wanting to become Fleet Admiral is because it's important to Blackbeard and Kuzan and their agenda coming together. We know Blackbeard wants to make Hachinosu a pirate kingdom, but a pirate kingdom under the world government. I've explained in many videos why I believe Blackbeard and Luffy share the same dream to create a pirate kingdom. In chapter 1080, Kobe replies to Blackbeard saying that's ridiculous. You know the world government would never allow it, a kingdom of criminals and pirates? But Blackbeard replies with, "Now don't go trampling on a man's dream." And so assuming this really is Blackbeard's dream, we have to also think about what Shanks told Whitebeard about Blackbeard's endless ambition and how he is someone who's never satisfied, someone who's always seeking more. I believe this pirate kingdom is simply a stepping stone, making him king of the pirates as he will be the king of Pirate Island, really cheating his way into that title. But Blackbeard will eventually strive for something even greater, which is the king of the entire world. I already explained in the previous video how Blackbeard will conquer the world and strive for the throne, similarly paralleling Rocksteady's Zebek if Luffy is a parallel to Roger. And Wizard of Wars also predicted that Blackbeard's ambition is to be an actual ruler of a kingdom in a previous video on our channel. And now we know that it's definitely true, contrasting to Luffy who just wants to be the freest man. And so assuming Blackbeard achieves his goal, this aligns alongside Kuzan, as if Blackbeard conquered the entire world government, he would have a powerful army of marines under his rulership. But this is where Kuzan comes in, because if Kuzan's greatest dream is to become a Fleet Admiral, if he helps Blackbeard overthrow the world government as a pirate, Blackbeard would then put Kuzan in charge of his new military, these new marines, making Kuzan able to mold the marines to his liking. Instead of the Godosei and Emu at the top, the Blackbeard pirates will take their place as the ultimate rulers of the world. But since Kuzan is on good terms with his captain, he's more likely to shape the marines to his ideal version. Now of course Blackbeard is someone who's betrayed people before, attacking Whitebeard and then Thatch, his former crewmates and his former father who adopted him. So Kuzan really does need to be careful, as it's possible Blackbeard could just backstab Kuzan in the end. But I think this is how Kuzan and Blackbeard's dreams coexist, and why he was convinced to join Teach, as they can help each other both achieve their ultimate agendas, creating this new empire of pirates and learning the truth of the world's biggest secrets and mysteries that the world government has always kept hidden, like the One Piece, the Void Century, and discovering the Poneglyphs. And so I hope you can finally understand understand why I love Kuzan so much, why I think he's really the most compelling character in One Piece. And as we see him fighting Garp in this final finale of the Hachinosu event, it almost seems like he's crying and freezing his tears as he stabs Garp with his ice spear. But as the Vader of the One Piece world, a failed chosen one, someone who's been convinced to join evil pirates, it's also possible that Kuzan's the one who backstabs Teach in the end and redeems himself. So is Kuzan a Marine? Is he a pirate? I hope you now understand why I say that Kuzan is the only character in One Piece who is genuinely both. If you enjoyed the video or anything I said here, make sure to like the video. And I highly recommend you check out this video where we look back at Whitebeard, analyzing one of my favorite characters in fiction.